So my name's Michael Day. I'm the National Treasurer of the Electric Vehicle Association. And these are my vehicles. So the first one that I built about 10 years ago is the 89 model MR2. It was a full conversion that I did a little while back. My second electric vehicle is the 2010 V-Moto E-Max. It's the scooter. That was an EV, it was made as an EV, and I bought it as a broken down project. There's a bit of a theme that you'll get here because the next vehicle is the Lotus. The Lotus, it's a 2002 Lotus Elise, which was converted by someone else in 2010, and I bought it as a failed project, another failed project, and am rebuilding it to replace the MR2 as it turns out. So a little bit about us. Electric Vehicle Association, formed in '73, as Graham said. Volunteer run, dedicated to switching transport to electric transportation as soon as possible. Branches in every state and about 800 members as of last night when we had our meeting. But basically we are EV builders, EV owners, business owners, and more lobbyists and advocates for electric vehicles. Just a plug for us, coming up our expo, Electric Vehicle Expo in Homebush in October. The crux of this, the direction of this presentation is why build an electric vehicle? And we get this quite a bit. You know, why do you own and build an electric vehicle? Right back at the beginning in 1973, when AVA kicked off, was around the time of the OPEC oil crisis. So petrol was hard to get, it was rationed, and people were looking for alternatives. Electric vehicles weren't new. They'd actually been around for a long time, back in the 80s and the 1900s. But in 1973, electric vehicles weren't terribly compelling, though. But if I go back and talking to our members, I ask about why they converted to electric vehicles, why they built electric vehicles, talking to the builders like myself. It comes down to a few things generally. They're cheap to run and maintain, and they reduce your carbon footprint. For me, it's the scooter. It's really cheap to run, gets me around town, very effective transport. For someone like Anthony, who's got the 121, he's done a lot of miles, a lot of kilometres in his 121. It's probably the most cost-effective EV I've seen out there. He converted it himself 10, 12 years ago, drives it every day, gets a lot of kilometres out of that thing. So cheap to run, reduce your carbon footprint. Others in the club are interested in more unique cars. They do it for to the V-Dub as an example, or the Road Magna, a very interesting car, or the Starion. They were unique and interesting cars. They either did it to make the car more interesting. The V-Dub as an example is try and keep the longevity of an older vehicle. A really sympathetic build as well, or something really unique and interesting. So they did it for the challenge, or they did it to try and create extra longevity for their vehicle. For me, where I got started, where I got interested, was mostly around the performance. I wanted something that was fast. And there were two references out there at the time, the White Zombie and the Killer Cycle, that were the fastest of their type at the time. It's a little bit old now, but at the time, they're the reason that I got into building electric vehicles. And they were quite compelling cars. But if I talk to others, so that was sort of the poll of the builders, if I talk to the owners do it for subtly different reasons. They're cheap to run and maintain. Performance, the Tesla guys obviously pop up there. Better for the environment, and energy security. So most notably people that have a bent, are interested in solar, that are interested in protecting the planet. So if you put all that together, cheap to run and maintain, unique, interesting vehicles, performance, energy security, and better for the environment. So why is this important? So it's fine for us to tinker away in the garage. That's literally my garage and group from the club. Or it's fine for the Tesla guys to talk about how they drove around Australia, as these cars did. But the real purpose, the real reason to do this, the real reason that we're talking about these things now is climate change. So it's pretty simple. The science is pretty clear cut. Basic science of CO2 emissions is pretty clear cut. Fossil fuel use is the primary source of human-induced CO2 pollution. Since the 70s, our use and the pollution from our use of fossil fuels has increased dramatically. I think it's 90% of the increase in carbon pollution has been since the 70s. It's growing quite dramatically. And from our perspective, because there's a lot of different ways that we create pollution, but there's a few ways that we, as individuals, impact that. There's not much we can do about energy, about industry. There's not much we can individually do about agriculture. But transportation, that's something that we are involved in every day. And it's the second biggest, I think. Did I get that right? No, it's one of the biggest. It's the second. Transportation in Australia is the second biggest form of pollution outside of energy generation, that is. So what does that mean for us, for me? So climate change is happening. Personal transportation is a significant source of greenhouse pollution. Internal combustion engines are primarily to blame for that. The Australian adoption of EVs is slow. But sustainable transportation is something that we can all be involved in. And we should all choose the most effective, efficient form of transportation possible. And for me, it's an electric vehicle. But I get a lot of questions, we get a lot of questions about why we did it, and then we get a lot of detractors as well about, is it really effective? Are electric vehicles really effective? And we get the frequently asked questions. So what if the energy comes from coal? And a lot of our energy does. So if you look at our energy mix, as of when I checked this morning, it's 87% fossil fuels and about 15% clean energy. But each year our grid is getting more and more cleaner. And that means that every EV, its source of energy is getting more and more cleaner every year. There's nothing you can do about an internal combustion engine vehicle that'll remain as dirty as it is from the day it started. An electric vehicle will get cleaner every year as the grid changes. What about the batteries? There's been some interesting analysis on the battery life of electric vehicles. There's some cars that have been out there quite a long time now, the iMEVs and the Nissan Leaf, and most notably the Teslas. And they're getting extremely long life out of their batteries, a lot longer than most predicted. But on top of that, the cars themselves are very energy efficient, very easy and simple to maintain. What's more is the batteries can be either reused, home batteries, and or they can be recycled. Saying that, we don't do a good job of that in Australia. Recycling lithium is not something that we do much right now, and we're going to have to. And what happens if you run out of charge? Well, basically you don't. Partly there's apps for those kinds of things. But if you're getting close, or you're desperate, you'll plug it into a power outlet. It might take time, but you can find power anywhere. So that's sort of the whys and wherefores of owning an electric vehicle. And if you're interested in building, we're the place to come and talk about building and owning an electric vehicle. Or if you're interested in having a look at one, then we'll have our show coming in October. Thanks. Oh,